He was completely different to his father. He would turn everything into a positive. Even after he'd shared with Kevin, his father had rung him the night before to tell him his crazy harebrained primate program was over and done with. The four friends could tell from Kevin's face that all was not well. At 9 a.m, news crews had started to arrive. Howard had indeed been very busy on his phone in the early hours. The Major flew to higher branches. He certainly did not like the idea of being on television. They interviewed Kevin and Howard. The Major thought, well, I'm no good here whilst all this is going on. I'll go and report to Mighty Oak. When the Major arrived home, he explained every single thing to Mighty Oak, not leaving out a single detail. Thank you so much, Major. Not at all, sir, not at all. Major, I think you should go home and get some rest. Thank you, sir, but I like to see a mission through. If I may, please. The Major looked really awkward. However, he'd started to speak, so it was best to say it. I've absolute faith in you. I've not seen you fail yet, sir. That boss, from what Howard said to Kevin, well, let's just say, I've never worried, sir, but this has me worried. Timmy piped up. I'm not. It'll be fine. Yes, of course, replied the Major. But in his head he was thinking, I'm not so sure. The Major simply said, Mighty Oak simply said, don't worry. Saturday morning, Ron White was packing the car with another picnic. He looked at his gleaming Morris Minor Andrew had washed yesterday. He was hoping the children wouldn't get sticky finger marks on his car. Are we ready for the off then, Rose, as he entered the cottage? Just waiting for Gary and Christopher. Rose, tell me again, how have we got lumbered? Ron! Well, how is it we're taking them to the zoo? Ron, you know yourself how Mark's been nagging all week about it. Well, apparently Gary and Christopher have been driving their parents crazy about the zoo all week. So I said, well, we were taking Mark. They might as well come too. I wanted to get on in the garden today. Well, I'm sorry, Ron, but it's done now, isn't it? Just seems odd. There was no mention of going to the zoo until this week. Then they drive us all crazy about going. So what is it? The lions, the bears they're excited about? No, Ron, apparently it's monkeys. Monkeys? The doorbell rang. It was Gary and Christopher. Mark grabbed his daddy's legs. I'm here, Daddy. The three boys stood by the front door. They were so excited. Rose looked sad. Ron said, Andrew, yes. I know, love. He's getting older. I actually think he wanted to come, but his friends were there when I mentioned it, and I think he was embarrassed. But that's ridiculous. I bet if you asked each one individually, I bet they secretly would all want to go. They all went to the car. Rose was locking the front door. She stopped and called out, I won't be a minute. Mark laughed. His mummy was funny. It's very busy, Rose. Is there something special on today? Not that I know of. The car park's full capacity. As they approached the ticket booths, oh, look, Rose, there was vans with different news stations. One was the BBC. Boys, what's going on here today? They all looked innocently at the grown-ups and shrugged their shoulders. Ron had to return to the car. He'd forgotten the picnic. Daddy, my satchel, please. What? You won't need that, son. Please, Daddy. Ron noticed Gary and Christopher were holding their tan leather satchels. What? Better get it, Ron. He doesn't want to be different. As Ron White was walking away, he was muttering to himself. All week, go to the zoo. Carrying satchels. Mark's not even started school yet. Do you want to see the lions? No. The monkeys, always flipping monkeys. No wonder I dream about them. Ron was looking at the guide. Now, boys, the first animals are giraffes. Then they have 2 hippos. The boys were running on ahead, chasing a wood pigeon. Boys, where are you going? You're going to miss... Where are you going? Mark turned around to the monkeys. Ron looked at the guide. Boys, they're right at the end of the zoo. Wait, you don't know the way. The boys had disappeared in the busy crowds. Ron, where are you going? To find a member of staff. No, don't waste time. Let's find the monkeys. They'll be there. Poor Ron was perplexed. His relaxing weekend. Work was less stressful than this. Ron paused for a moment at the bear enclosure. There was a huge bear pushing forward a metal upside-down dustbin lid. People were throwing fruit and nuts that they had bought from the zoo. Then he would pull it back and eat the contents. Rose, look at this. Great. Now Rose had gone. He looked at the guide. Bears, llamas, cat section, lions, tigers, play area, picnic site, then primates. Right, off he headed. He reached the primate section. He looked over and he spotted his wife, stood next to the three boys, looking at the monkey enclosure. He smiled. He was looking at his wife. She was the most beautiful woman there, her blonde hair pinned up neatly. She always looked so smart. He thought the dusky pink suit looked just perfect. He was very proud to be her husband. He had a twinge of guilt remembering criticizing her choice of clothes for just visiting a zoo. He walked through the thick crowds and linked his arm through his wife's and kissed her cheek. You were right. These three little monkeys did come from monkeys. What's all this with the cameras? Ron, I've no idea. They're interviewing two men.